We are studying the complexity of algorithms, and in order to analyze an algorithm, and we need to find out exactly how to compare two different algorithms, because our interest is to find out the best possible program which will work in the most efficient way. So in order to do that, we need some formal mechanism to analyze and compare between two programs or two algorithms. And we discussed in the previous class that the complexity measures are usually the time and the space required by a program. And the first and most important of both of them, amongst both of them, is that of time. Unless space is exponential, time is absolutely the most important criteria. Therefore, we will study formal mechanisms of how to measure the time required by an algorithm or by a program. The first thing we encountered was that having pure CPU time is not a good idea, because CPU time will change depending on the type of machine, the instruction set it has, and it becomes impossible to compare between different programs. Secondly, the same program on the same computer for different inputs will take different amounts of time. So we must have a mechanism to really compare between two algorithms or two programs, which is not only reasonably machine independent, but also has got which we can measure the same program using the same structure of our analysis for various kinds of inputs. Now, once we go for machine independence and for input size independent or input independent analysis, we have to make certain approximations. The first is we cannot go in for CPU time, and second is we cannot say exactly for what input what the amount of time that will be taken. Now, when we are measuring the complexity of algorithms, we have to remember that whenever we try to analyze an algorithm, we have to be very careful about what input is coming to the problem. For example, if you have to find this, if you have to write a sorting program of n numbers and you want to analyze it, you have to know very carefully that if you are going to have only 10 numbers to be sorted, then obviously you, or if you are going to have a million numbers to be sorted, the strategy may be totally different. And if you do not know the size of the numbers, it may range from 100 to 20 million, then again the strategy will be different. If it is known that it will always range from 200 to 500, then the strategy may be different. Now, when we know that programs are to be written for a small size of input, for example, we are to multiply matrices which are only 10 by 10 and two matrices are to be multiplied. In present technology of computers, the time required is not very large, unless this matrix multiplication is required to be done million number of times. So we need to compare and analyze these when actually the time is very large, the real time of using this operation is very large. In such situations, and to make it machine independent and independent of the size of the number of inputs or the variation in input, we make certain approximations. The first approximation that we make is that we assume a model of computation, and in that model of computation we give for every operation which can be done on fixed size data, we give it some unit time. And we say addition is done in unit, addition of two fixed numbers is done in unit time, fixed size numbers. And fixed size means size for which the size is a constant. We know there is a limit on the constant. Say some maximum will be say 10-bit numbers, or maximum will be 15-bit numbers. There is a limit to it. You cannot say it can be any arbitrary size number, and all additions of arbitrary size numbers is constant. We'll come to this issue because this is very important. So we make the assumption that fixed size operations take unit amounts of time, and we decide which takes what amount of time. Based on this unit amount of time, we try to find out what is the time required, how many units of time does this particular program or function take. And in terms of units of time also, we cannot say 20 units or 30 units, because we want to make it independent of the size of the input or the variation in the input. Now we cannot say for this input it will take this, that input, so we cannot enumerate out how many steps it is going to take for what input, because the inputs may actually, the number of inputs may itself be infinite. So we have to make it a function of something of the inputs. And one important criteria which has been found to be most useful in analyzing the complexities of algorithms is to make it a function of the input size. So when we measure the complexity of algorithms, we do two things. We measure the time complexity in terms of steps as a function of the input size. Very informally, we say that for some problem, if the input size, see, the input size may be parameterized by one parameter or two or three or whatever, because if there are 5 inputs, maybe we can give 5 different parameters for 5 of them, but then you can combine all these 5 and make it into one size also. So under normal circumstances, we will come to other, we say Fn is equal to 12 n cubed plus 15, we will find out the number of steps, n log n minus 5 n to the power log n, some function we may have got, and this we call the time complexity function of this particular problem, where n is a measure of the input size. Now see, in our sorting example, or in finding the maximum of n numbers, we found that Fn is equal to some 5n minus 3 or something like that, where n is the number of numbers which are of which maximum is to be found. Now there is a very important thing which has to be understood about this n. You can say that n is the number of numbers which are input. Now, since this is a mathematical equation and people say this is a function of n, so people say, how did you say that there are n inputs? I would say that there is only one input. You just combine all the numbers and make it into one number. And say, for example, I will say, I will give you a character string which is one input, which is like this: 12 hash 15 hash 13 hash 9 hash 7, and you read this as a character string, and I will say you have got one input only, and then you break it up and find out and sort this and return one character string. So does that mean that the input size is 1? Then for the same problem, if you just take the input in a different way, you will get, for one case you will say my input size is n because I am taking n numbers. In another case, I will say my input size is 1 because I am taking one number. And here it will be 5n minus 3. In the other case, I will say, what is that? It is just a constant because it is just dependent on the length of the input. It is the complexity of sorting, if I take it as a character string, will be proportional to the length of the input. Alright. So the concept of input size has to be understood very, very carefully, so that we are not misled when we are doing the analysis. Let us remember that each of our operations, when we have said that an operation takes one step, that meaning is defined this way, that for fixed size numbers, that means fixed size means there is a maximum limit on the size of inputs to an operation. For example, if I say addition x is equal to a plus b takes constant time, takes one step, 1 unit time. then there is an underlying assumption that the size of A, the size of B, and the size of X, all three of them are bound by a fixed constant. Alright, all three of them are bound by a fixed constant. Therefore, for all your operations, there is a fixed constant. Now, if you understand the computer architecture carefully, this fixed constant is usually the size of your data. You know, when you say a 16-bit computer, when the data size is 16 bits, data unit is 8 bits. So that is the limit. It cannot be variable. That way, so if you say addition of two numbers takes constant time, then addition of two numbers of each of 1 million size will also be assumed to take constant time. That will give you a wrong analysis. So when we say this takes constant time, we assume a fixed constant data size. This will be represented in log n bits. Suppose a number 25. So this 25 will be represented, 16 numbers can be represented in 4 bits. 25 numbers can be represented in 5 bits. Similarly, there will be a maximum limit. In any computer you will see there is a maximum limit on the size of a number. Therefore, now when I talk about input size, I know that there is a fixed maximum constant on the size of one input. Alright. So the size of that input size, that function, that n, is a function of that fixed constant. So now if I say my n numbers will be read as 15, 12 as a character string, and this is how it will be read as a character string, and I will separate it out. I know there is a fixed size on my numbers representation. This will be some n into that size. So that will be the input size n. So this way we will get, even whatever way you do it, the size of your input will be a function. Otherwise it will be a constant for all algorithms, or it will be a function of the same n for all algorithms. It cannot be a constant in one case and a variable in another case. So we have to be very clear about this input size. There are other issues about input size which we shall come to a bit later on. So that way, the problem of adding up two arbitrary sized numbers is not constant time. When you say I will give you two arbitrary sized numbers and you give me the result of that, then you have to tell me what is that n. So I will now say the complexity of adding two arbitrary sized number is fn, where this n is a function of the maximum constant size on which you can really add two numbers. And then you can write a program in which you will say, for example, if I give you 5, 7, 8, 3, 2, 9, 11, 15, one number is like this. So it's 5, 8, 7, 3, 9, 2, 1, 1, 1, 5. And I ask you to add it with 8, 7, 3, 2, 7, 6, 1, 8. Then what will we do? We will have a fixed size. We will break up this number into so many numbers of that size. We will break up this number into so many numbers of that size. And then we will do our addition. We will add this part with this part. We know this part. This is our fixed size. So this takes constant time. And then we will take a carry and we will store it in another such fixed size variable. Then we will add this and add the carry, and we will do normal addition like we do bitwise. So now if there are n such, so if now this is n, my addition operation will be proportional to n such additions. It will be 1 plus 2 plus 2 plus 2, because one addition at the base, there is no carry. Otherwise, I have to do one addition with itself and one with the carry. So it will turn out to be 2n minus 1 plus 2. Sorry, 2n minus 1 plus 1. This is 1, and then for each of them 2. So this algorithm for multiplying two arbitrary size the numbers to add two arbitrary size numbers, my complexity will be 2n minus 1. So this is how we make a realistic analysis. You have to be very pragmatic, and you have to know very clearly what assumptions you have made when you analyze this. Otherwise, you would have simply said multiplying any size number is a constant, because my addition of two arbitrary size numbers is a constant, because my addition operation is a constant. This is not a correct analysis. So you have to be very pragmatic about your analysis. So the concept of input size is important. And secondly, you have to know the range of your operation. That is, I know that my input size will vary from 10 to 20. If I know, then I know that it's actually a constant. For example, I will have to sort 100 numbers only. Effectively, you know you have to sort a maximum of 100 numbers. So your complexity is a constant time. Even if you say that my addition of 100 numbers, suppose I give you 100 numbers and I ask you to add it. You can say that obviously for addition of n numbers, I have to make n minus 1 additions. Add this, add this, add this, add this, and store it in a temporary variable, some n minus 1 to n minus 1 additions. But if I know that n is less than equal to 100, then obviously this is bound by a constant. So my total complexity is no more a function of n. It is a function of n in the range from 1 to 100, but it is also upper bounded by a constant. I know that I will not take more than so much time. So I have to analyze it within this range. It is not difficult to analyze in small ranges, because usually the time required in such small ranges is low. The difficulty comes when you have to analyze it in the worst case for all inputs, for all valid inputs. That is, how will you add n numbers, where n can be anything? Then this function becomes very important. So if I have one which is going to do sorting in and another which is going to do sorting in and the third which is going to do sorting in this is 5n square minus 3n plus 2. This is n cube minus 8n square plus 8n minus 9. This is 3000 n log n minus 9. Now when n is 1, this will turn out to be very good. Let's make it positive, otherwise things will look very odd. So when n is 2, then this will become possibly the smallest. Let us make this also bigger, 305 n square. Now when n becomes slightly more, this will become better. But we are analyzing for all valid inputs. When n tends to become very, very large, then this will be best. So depending on the range of the inputs, the complexity becomes important, which works better. Secondly, these constants are not important, because these constants have come out of a lot of approximation. It is the highest order term which really dictates matters when n tends to large. And why are we interested when n tends to large? Because these are usually positive growth functions. When n becomes large, this suddenly cannot become 0. That is, as when the input becomes larger and larger, the time taken by the algorithm becomes less and less. You will rarely find such problems which are provided to you. So these are usually positively growing functions. And the time really becomes a crunch when n tends to infinity. And that is why we try and see how to compare these, especially in the worst case for all valid inputs. When n becomes large, do they have a proper behavior? That sort of analysis is called asymptotic complexity analysis, or it is also called asymptotic analysis. That is, suppose we have a function. After having defined the input size n, one of them is like this. The other one now, based on these two, we cannot differentiate between them. In this range, in the range up to this, say, n dashed, this one is worse than this. This is better. This is Fn. Up to this range, this is better. Again, in this range, this is better. And if throughout the ranges they start flipping, this is better and that is better, this is better, that is better, then you cannot say anything surely about somebody being better than somebody else. But if after a certain point, one of them is definitely better than the other beyond this, which is called the n naught point, then we say that this, let us call this Fn, and this, let us call this Gn. We say that Fn is less than Gn asymptotically. That is, after n greater than n naught, and usually these are positively growing functions. They are not like sine waves and all that, continuously going up and down and up and down. Because we are measuring time, and time is usually expected to increase with more increase in input size. So after n, this is said to be greater than this. This is how you compare them asymptotically. Now, to compare these asymptotically, we have certain formal notations and definitions to use. And we have to be careful about when we say one is better than another and less than another. In such a situation, when this is always better than this, we say it is something like this. But even this may not happen. This function, we will come to this example a bit later. So we have what is called the concept of asymptotic growth functions. And here we define three kinds of asymptotic functions. One is called the upper bounding function. Which is called the big O notation. The second is the lower bounding function, The third is the order function. These are the three symbols or notations used for. This is given Gn. We try to find out another function which upper bounds this, that is beyond a certain range, that is when n becomes very large, this function will be always greater than this function. Lower bounding function is, then this function will be less than this function beyond a certain range. And order function is that both are equivalent in some sense. Now we'll see their definitions and understand their meanings. The ON notation, the OFN notation, which is called the upper bounding, asymptotic upper bounding function. A function Gn is equal to O of Fn. So given two functions, Fn and Gn, both asymptotically positive, that is beyond a certain n, both of them are always positive, they never become negative. So we always work on asymptotic positive functions, we don't work on anything else. When Gn is equal to O of Fn, that is Gn is upper bounded by Fn, if there are two constants C and N0, both of them positive, such that 0 is less than equal to Gn is less than equal to C into Fn for all n greater than N0. A function Gn is upper bounded by a function Fn if there are constants C and N0 both positive, such that for all n greater than N0, Gn is greater than equal to 0, obviously positive function, and it is also less than equal to C into Fn. Let us consider one or two examples. We are finding out G, let Gn be any questions?
Right, I understand that your Gn is equal to O and then in brackets F. So it's like, why shouldn't it be the other way around, sir? O and then in brackets Gn equal to Fn. The upper bounding function of Gn is equal to Fn.
This is an equation, so there is no problem. This is not an assignment. This is an equation. So you write this side or that side, it does not matter.
No, so like upper bounding function of Gn is equal to Fn.
Upper bound OGn is equal to Fn. No. This is the notation. It's some notation. You can use it this way or that way. The notation is this. Gn is upper bounded by Fn. This is the notation. So this is Gn, this is Fn. So what we are to find? Two constants C and N0, such that for all n greater than N0, zero is less than equal to Gn and less than equal to C into Fn. Here the choices are very simple and obvious. You choose C equal to 1 and N0 equal to anything, 2. You will satisfy this condition. So you will say that Gn is upper bounded by Fn. Let us take another Fn. Here, is Fn an upper bounding function of Gn when n tends to large? Because when n tends to large, n cube is going to become much more than 500 n square. But to formally prove this, you have to find the value of C and n0, any constant C and any n0, and choose C is equal to, what C will you choose? You have to choose a C and you have to choose an n0. Choose C equal to 1 and not equal to 502. Now beyond that, obviously this one is going to be larger than this one. So you will satisfy. You have to, once you find these two, you may be sure that beyond n this function is going to beat this function. Now even if there was a constant here, now let us have a look. If Fn was equal to 0.3 n cube, even then this would be an upper bounding function of this, because you would have found some other C and n0. That way, this asymptotic analysis takes care of the speed of the machine, saying that okay, these constants could have been done faster in some other machine, but asymptotically, this, if it is asymptotically an upper bound in one system, in one machine, it will remain an asymptotic upper bound in another machine as well, because two machines will differ amongst each other by a proportion only. Because each operation, if that is done in one step, this may be done in 0.00001 steps. So the original function, if this is an cube plus bn square plus cn, will only differ in a, b and c. The other things will remain constant because we have taken it in terms of input size, which is independent in both of them. Now, if for one particular a, b and c you can find constants to make it an upper bound, for another value of a, b and c you will find some other constant. So which effectively means that when n tends to large, a function will be, so you can say that this is, if you choose Fn is equal to n cubed also, it will still remain an upper bounding function. So that is why you can say Gn is equal to upper bounded by n cube. You will see in textbooks a notation like this comes. Why does a notation like this come? Because these constants become unimportant. If something is upper bounded by 0.3 n cube plus 200 n square minus 5, it will also be upper bounded by this. So we leave only the highest term to compare between them. Finally, suppose Gn is equal to 502 n square plus 3n minus 7, and Fn is equal to n square minus 7n minus 15. Is Gn upper bounded by Fn? What is the answer? Is Gn upper bounded by Fn? Yes or no? That means you have to prove that is 502 n square plus 3n minus 7 greater than, sorry, less than or equal to c n square minus 7cn minus 15 for some beyond some n naught. You will get it. Why don't you choose c equal to 20? Then from n equal to 1, it will start becoming greater. Just have a look. Choose c equal to 20,000. Sorry, we have chosen 200,000. It is 2 lakhs. Then for n equal to 1, this will be greater. For n equal to 2, it will continue to be greater. So, Gn is upper bounded. You will be able to find two constants. And therefore, you can say Gn is equal to upper bounded by it is upper bounded by Fn, and if Fn was equal to n square also, it would have still be upper bounded by Fn. But if I choose Fn, suppose I choose Fn is equal to 7n plus 5, then I will be able to get a constant c. I will choose c to be 200 lakhs maybe, but I will not be able to get an n naught beyond which this function will be less than equal to this function always. I will not be able to get. So, this Fn is not an upper bounding function of Gn. So, upper bounding functions give you a measure of whether this algorithm can be, if there is a function whose growth is greater than or equal to the growth of this function when n tends to large. So, if we have understood these upper bounding functions clearly, the equivalent notation is a lower bounding function, which is just the reverse notation. A function Gn is lower bounded by another function Fn if there are constants, positive constants c and naught greater than 0, such that 0 less than equal to Cn less than equal to Gn for all n greater than n0. So, this is the other one, and you can say that if Fn is upper bounded by Gn, then Gn is lower bounded by Fn. Because if you can find the constants on that side, you take 1 by that and you will get the constants on this side as well. You will find constants on this side. The next is the order notation, which identifies equivalent growth functions. Suppose I have got Fn and Gn such that Fn is upper bounded by Gn and Fn is also lower bounded by Gn. I will give you an example. Then you will get Fn, you will also get, both you will get. So, you can say that these asymptotically the growth of these functions are equivalent. They only differ by a constant, in the sense that if you could put this algorithm onto a faster machine, this may run faster than this. It is just the speed of the machine may make the difference. Even for all n beyond a certain range, this will run faster. On a slower machine, this will run faster. If this works on a slower machine, this will. If this runs on a faster machine, on equal machines, maybe this will run faster. So when you have two functions which are equivalent in growth, then you characterize them by the order notation, which just combines the Gn and Fn, which says a function Gn is of order Fn if there are positive constants C1, C2 and N0 such that Gn is lower bounded by C1 Fn and upper bounded by C2 Fn for all n greater than that N0, beyond that N0. Once you can get an order notation, you have characterized the growth of that algorithm. You say an algorithm is order n square, then you know that this is exactly what it is going to take. When you say it is upper bounded by n square, it may take log n time also. When you say it is lower bounded by log n, it can take exponential time also. But when you say that it is of order n square, then you have accurately characterized it both on the basis of its lower and upper bounds. That is why you will notice when you analyze an algorithm in asymptotically, you try to find out what is the order of the algorithm. And when we are designing algorithms or data structures, we would like to design those whose orders of complexity are minimized. That is what we mean by designing time efficient algorithms. Algorithms whose orders of complexity are minimized. So next, once we have understood what are these asymptotic growth functions and got used to this notation, we will see how to find out the orders of complexity of some of the algorithms that we have designed and what they look like, how they compare with each other. So we'll see that in the next class.